Hello, welcome everybody to this English session of a very special book that we're going to talk about today. And it's really an honor to be here together with my colleague Marc Achala, who we've been working with at ICEERS since about 2012, and is the author of this book. And we're also accompanied by Jasmine Verdi, who's the Communications and Marketing Associate of Synergetic Press. Who's the publisher of the English version of this book. And so to open the session of today, I'm going to start with sharing a little bit more about the backstory and then really coming to the book. I'm going to let Marc respond to questions. We're going to kind of explore some of the topics discussed in the book and some of the ideas about the field of integration and where things need to be heading towards and what's needed. But just to give first a little bit of backstory, the organization ICEERS, which stands for the International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research and Service, ICEERS, we started to work, the organization was born in 2009. And in the beginning, we didn't really kind of come up with these ideas about the things that we needed to do, but it was more really responding to community needs. And one of those needs in the beginning was legal defense around plant medicine practices. When people were arrested and started to contact us for help, we started to get involved. And in around 2012, we really started to get a lot of questions about, for support for integration. People sometimes were really suffering after having experiences with plant medicines. And so Marc, who was working at the time at ICEERS, he kind of started to respond to those inquiries. And at some point in 2013, we really saw we needed to start more proactively responding and offering integration services. So we've been doing that free donation-based, since 2013. Over 1,000 people have come through the service, and we would do up to about 5 free sessions per person, really trying to get a person from a place where they felt that something horrible had happened to them, something really difficult that maybe should not have happened, to a place where they could see that there was actually an opportunity to work with that and getting people empowered to then take the next steps. So that's been the work Marc has been conducting at ICEERS. Additionally, or in parallel to that, also we kind of met more in depth at Cosmic Air. It's a kind of a psychedelic integration or crisis support service at Boom Festival, where we met in 2010 and have been working since. Marc at some point also started to do the trainings of the team. So he has also extensive experience in dealing with, challenging experiences in those contexts. And so about when we reached, I think, 2018, after the service had been actually government funded for about 2 years through a European Union project, it was time for Marc to take some time off of doing the clinical assistance and starting to really integrate all of the lessons learned from all of these cases seen, and kind of develop out of that a book which could help steer the field of integration and become kind of a guide also for really how to do integration, because everybody talks about integration. When we started, there wasn't very much talk about this whole field, but everybody has their own idea about what integration is, what good practices are around integration, what are the things that should be avoided. And so at some point we did actually an event some years ago as well, in which we started to think about how can we bring together different perspectives on integration, so that we can start making sense of this field and look for ways to really kind of consolidate good practices. And so the book is a combination of clinical experience. Marc also is trained in holotropic breathwork and has facilitated experiences for many people in that area. So the book is kind of a lot of experience from all these fields, but in addition, also a lot of literature research and really kind of an in-depth view of what already was existing in the field of integration. So maybe I'll just leave it there for now and let Marc share a little bit more about the process of the coming together of the book. What you saw your intentions were, and maybe kind of in general what you were finding in the process of writing it.
Hello, good evening, everybody. First of all, if you see that today I stalk a little bit when I speak, is that because I'm jet lagged. I just arrived from New York this morning, so I haven't had yet a proper sleep. So bear with me if I'm a little bit clumsy with my words. But yeah, to answer that question, actually the process of writing the book was more of an act of curiosity for me. Um, what it began as an initial idea of just gathering all the information that we got from the support service throughout the years and just describe the integration practice that we had been doing. Um, Through reading and finding prior texts that had been written about integration, it became something that I wanted to learn more. It was like, all right, there's people that have been saying things already about integration, from spiritual traditions back to early psychedelic research in the 50s and 60s. So that was an exercise of curiosity and going back to those sources, and also it became to honor actually the work that had been done before. So then the process of writing was a mixture of research, reading these texts, these ancient texts and prior scientific papers that have been published, and comparing that with some of the observations that I had had. At the beginning, when the first idea of taking this break in 2018 and writing the book started to take form, it was okay. Let's write almost like a manual or a description of the integration procedures that I had been developing over the years. This was actually it came mostly through talks that I had been given on integration. So as you were saying, Ben, we organized some meetings with other people that were doing integration, and then we started sharing. I was sharing my perspective, other people were sharing their perspectives. And one of the things that I realized is that people were interested in the model of integration or the way that I was talking about integration. And they would ask me, is this written anywhere? Can we get more information about what you're talking about? So then the idea was, all right, let's write something so people can access that anytime, and it's not just dependent on talks or conferences. No? But then, as I was saying, I took this break, and I remember when I was in south of India, in Tamil Nadu, this Zen temple. I was doing a retreat there, and we had some time, and we could read texts from the library. And then in the library, I was reading a book by Ramakrishna, and I found something that Ramakrishna called the yoga brashtas, the fallen from yoga, people that fall from the yoga practice, meaning those that had attained certain knowledge in the tradition of yoga, and they had even developed certain powers, siddhis, they call it the tradition. So they had certain experiences, they had visions, they had heart openings, mind openings to higher realms of existence. But they become trapped in those visions. They become trapped in the experiences that they were having, and they are not able to transcend those experiences toward higher levels of knowledge. And I was very shocked because that description was very, very similar to something that I had observed in certain requests of integration. So throughout the years, I had been compiling the different kinds of requests that people were making as at the support service, which is something that you can find in chapter 5 of this book. And then I was surprised to see one of these descriptions in spiritual literature. So then it opened a new level for writing the book. And I was, all right, I want to know more about what has been said already. And I was joking the other day with a friend. I was like, I don't think that I discovered anything. Maybe I have not discovered anything. Maybe I'm just rewriting things that have been around for many, many years. So yeah, that became then the intention of the book, not just to show my method of integration, but to do some sort of integrative work around integration, to describe integration in a finer detail, and to find commonalities, and with intention to serve as an inspiration for people that could do integration and develop their own practices. So that was a little bit the framework in which the book appeared.
Mm-hmm. You wrote the book in Spanish. No, it's also published in Spanish, and then we were thinking about how can we make sure that this is also available in English. There was already a relationship that was established with Synergetic Press, the last World Ayahuasca Conference within 2019. We collaborated, and eventually I'm very pleased that the Synergetic is the book publisher of this book. So maybe, Jasmine, if you can share a little bit from how the process came about to then get the book launched in English.
Yeah. Thank you for having me here, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone, or evening, depending on where you are. I'm calling in from Mexico. I live in San Miguel de Allende, and I think, because of my proximity to the States, I'm the only one that has the physical book at the moment. So this is it. It's so beautiful. Psychedelic Integration, Psychotherapy for Non-Ordinary States of Consciousness. Yeah, I can say a little word about the press and a little bit about, what really drew us to publishing this book in particular. So Synergetic Press has been around for the last 40 years. We're a publisher. We publish books on ecology, consciousness, psychedelic medicine, ethnobotany, social justice, and our mission is really to publish books that inspire regenerative culture and that push forward regenerative ideas. And I think there's something really special when it comes to like the intersection of psychedelic medicine, consciousness, ecology, and the kind of world that we could create by really pushing forward those ideas and sharing that knowledge. And when it comes to Marc's book in particular, Psychedelic Integration, I personally, working at Synergetic Press, but also kind of working more broadly in the psychedelic space, and as someone who's going to or looking to become a psychedelic practitioner / therapist myself, I really find this book so vital at this time, when the field is opening up so much, and there are studies being done in psychedelic research centers across the world now, and it's no longer something that is just niche and fringe. And mainstream media have been picking up psychedelics, and they've been writing endless articles about psychedelics in the New York Times, and even more recently, Michael Pollan's Netflix documentary, How to Change Your Mind. I think there's a lot of people, and often, curious people, but also sometimes desperate people who are seeking out these medicines for attempts at self-healing and also self-discovery. There's a range of reasons why people might seek psychedelics out, but I think that this book kind of speaks to how things can potentially go awry, and also the destabilization and the challenges that can arise during such experiences. And I think, as psychedelics are unleashed onto the mainstream, there's also the need for greater support and just a deepening of knowledge and awareness on the part of practitioners, but also on the part of, the people seeking out these medicines for themselves. And so I think this book speaks to both sides. It speaks to people like me who are wanting to practice in this space. And also, I work in peer support as well. So I work for an organization called Fireside Project, which is based in the States, which is a psychedelic peer support organization. It's a phone number that people can call or text if they're looking to if they're tripping actively and they need support in that moment, or if they want to integrate an experience, and for me personally, having read this book, I really feel that it's an invaluable resource for people to kind of ground themselves. And as I said, both as practitioners and as psychedelic seekers, you might say. So that's a little bit about this book and why I think it's more relevant now than ever. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. It took a while to get the book in English, so I wrote it in Spanish for obvious reasons. I could have written it in English, but it would have required a lot of editing and polishing. So and I also wanted to have it available in Spanish as well. So that was one of the reasons. But we were aware that the English-speaking world was important, no, to publish the book in English as well. So how to publish, how to translate a book that's been written in Spanish into English? It might seem like a very straightforward thing, but it's not so easy, you know, because the translation to begin with is very expensive. I mean, you need someone to devote a lot of time, months, on translating this book and doing a good job. You need someone that knows about the field, someone that, yeah, you need a proper translator, no? So the first part was find this person, and I'm happy to say that a good friend of mine, Adam Aronovich, did this. We've shared adventures at Cosmic Air as well. We've known each other for a long time, so it was a pleasure that he wanted to translate this book. And then we had to raise money for paying the translation, and then we were very lucky to find two very generous donors, Pep Cunyat from La Maloca and another friend, Clement Schletwine, that they offered to pay the translation, and that's why it was possible. It was interesting because Synergetic Press was open to publish this book just with the first 2 chapters of the book, like a small sample of the translation. But I didn't have the manuscript translated until many months later, no? So it was a process of a little bit of uncertainty. Will they say that they're not interested anymore when they have the full manuscript, or what will happen? No? So it was a little bit of an uncertain process, but I'm happy that when the manuscript was ready, Synergetic Press, they were interested, and then the process of working with Synergetic Press was really beautiful as well. I was working along with Noel Armstrong, who was editing the text and making suggestions and making sure that the text flew well, no? And the English was as good as it could be. So yeah, I'm very happy how the process went to translate the book from Spanish to English.
So maybe we can go into 2 directions in this session of today. One is kind of more, what Jasmine touched upon, the people seeking these experiences, and a bit more insight about, you've been doing so many hours, through the support service, and just seeing, why people have challenging experiences, what goes wrong. So maybe you can share a little bit about what's that reality that you've seen, why do things go wrong, and a little bit maybe about how they can be avoided. So maybe we can start there, and then afterwards we should also talk really about the field of kind of the current state of biomedicalization, of psychedelics, and globalization of plant medicine. You also have worked as a therapist in clinical psilocybin research. So there's kind of this excitement around this current moment of like psychedelics are going to be medicines pretty soon, and there's all this promise attached to it, but I think also really looking at what is still needed and what are some of the things that we need to be mindful of for this to be done successfully. Let's first go to the participants.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I would say that most of the integration books and texts that I have seen, they focus mostly on the positive aspects of integration, like how can we work with these enlightening and beautiful experiences that most of the times people have, how to bring those knowledge, how to embody it, how to ground it. I would say that my work is biased towards the challenging experiences that people go through, because of where we got the experience, which was the support center at ICERS. We were receiving requests and emails from people that were having challenging experiences. So most of the times when people have beautiful and enlightening experiences, they don't seek for support after that. Yeah. So I have a bias towards these negative experiences because that's what I've been working mostly during these 10 years. So that's become the main specialization of my work, to see why do difficult experiences happen, what happens when a difficult experience happens, and if it can be prevented or not, or what can we do to minimize the risks, and once it has happened, how can we do to work with that specific situation after a challenging experience and regain balance, and not only that, but use that experience as a potential seed for growth. Yeah. So, and then the work has been for me to develop effective strategies to address these situations. And it still is, yeah, but it's been a work in progress. When I started working at the support service, I had mostly a training in transpersonal psychology and the degree in university in psychology. So I didn't have a lot of tools to practice psychotherapy. And my method of integration had to evolve over years. Yeah, at the beginning, I was mostly based on humanistic approaches and transpersonal approaches. But at some point, as years went by and we were receiving more and more requests, I realized that some people were struggling with some difficult symptoms, such as insomnia or anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, all sorts of symptoms that were not there before the psychedelic experience and appeared as a result of the experience. Yeah, and somehow the person was suffering because of that. So then it was a journey for me to see how can I support people in these kind of situations. What do I have to learn to be effective in supporting these cases? Yeah. So then that led me to study brief strategic therapy, which is a school that it's pretty much focused on dealing with acute situations and finding ways of creating some change in short time. And that was a really good add-on to my transpersonal and humanistic and more spiritual approach to therapy and psychedelics. Yeah. So that was a really amazing journey for me, and I would say that it still is. I'm constantly trying to understand what works best and how to better support people that have gone through difficult psychedelic experiences. And more recently, not only that, but what is the best approach, or how can we maximize the combination of psychedelics and psychotherapy? What's the most effective way to use psychedelics in the context of a therapeutic process, and what kinds of therapy are more helpful in this regard? No. So yeah, that's been the motivation that's been driving my work in the last years. And in this process, one of the things that happened is that I started seeing similarities in the requests that we were receiving. So we would receive, 600, 700 emails per year, but some of them had a lot of similarities. They would describe situations that were similar. So then I started, once a year, I would get all the emails, all the data, and put them in somehow in different folders, to try to see how many categories we had of different challenges that people were experiencing. And then after some years of researching that, I came to different classifications of types of difficulties that people experience. Yeah, and this is described in the book. And I talk about the lack of preparation. I talk about difficult experiences that have not been resolved. I talk about very traumatic experiences that can resemble psychotic breaks. I talk about repeated intakes without integration, about problems with facilitators, also the issue of recovered memories. When someone recovers a previously unknown traumatic memory, a memory of abuse that they were not aware of before, what to do with that. And people that had previous mental disorders, and through psychedelics they become destabilized again. So these main categories that I've encountered throughout the years. And then I tried to find what was the best psychotherapeutic approach to each of these situations. So then in the book, I describe a proposal, a model for intervention in these different scenarios. And that's been maybe the most exciting part for me, of creating this method and describing these scenarios.
So in addition to difficult experiences, I think also we have seen sometimes when people have very beautiful and inspiring experiences, but then they go home and they start taking action in a fast manner and maybe not very well thought out. So then maybe 6 months later, their life becomes a total mess, because they're actually making decisions that are totally destabilizing, and then are incapable of coping with the consequences of that. And then the other piece is also that sometimes the facilitators of the ceremonies, as they are doing interpretations or they kind of do circles afterwards, work from like offering certain interpretations that might also actually cause harm. One of the things where we have launched recently in Spanish, and we're going to do in English, is the Aya Safety School, which is very much focused on minimum safety standards and kind of giving guidance to people working, with plant medicines to really, understand also what are the boundaries of of their expertise, and where not to go, or be mindful of where to go, not to cause these type of negative impacts. So it's curious to hear your thoughts about those.
Yeah, and definitely this is an important aspect, no? As psychedelic medicines and psychedelic substances become more integrated in our society, it's something that people look for. We also have more people offering these experiences, and therefore there's the need to increase the safety standards, and there's the need to collectively educate ourselves to create safe containers for having these sort of experiences. Sometimes we do see, that people after an intense and beautiful ayahuasca experience or psychedelic experience, they feel that they need to make important changes in their lives. I don't know, like finish a marriage or begin a relationship or leave a job or move to another city. In the holotropic breathwork context, we say that if such a decision, like a big decision, is good, after the experience is going to be good in a month's time. No? So sometimes there's a lot of we can run into mistakes by rushing too much and taking strong decisions. No? The psyche speaks in metaphors, psychedelics speak in metaphors. So sometimes this big change that we've seen in our psyche is not yet the final shape that it will have after some time. No? So definitely there's the need to maturing those insights that we get in psychedelic experiences, and also maturing in the way that we collectively understand psychedelic experiences and how to support them. So yeah, Jeronimo and David have been doing amazing work in creating this IA safety course. So I'm looking forward to have it in English as well, because it's a really, really good resource. And it also comes from experience, in these travels that we've done together to the US, to UK, Israel, in which we've gathered with practitioners from the ayahuasca communities, and we've tried to understand a little bit better what are their needs, what kind of problems do they find when they facilitate experiences, or what they feel that they can improve, or what they want to learn more. And it's been a really rich and amazing journey to meet with these people and share knowledge, and that's also been a big part of the inspiration for the book as well. So yeah.
Great. There's a few questions here in the chat about this particular aspect. So I don't know if we maybe give a little bit of time to go into those.
Okay.
For example, when you speak about improving efficiency of psychedelic use with psychotherapy, I'm curious if you've explored the types of metrics that might be used to quantify this effectiveness.
That's a really good question and a very difficult one to answer, because when talking about psychedelics, it's really, really difficult to understand what are the healing mechanisms, what are the mechanisms of change, and how to measure that change. That's a problem that we have in all psychotherapies that are not strictly based on behavior. Yeah. So in research settings now, they have to take some decisions in how to measure if psychedelic therapy is effective or not. So for example, for PTSD, they use mostly a measure that's the CAPS. It's a questionnaire that measures the severity of PTSD. For depression, they have to use another questionnaire that's validated, and that the scientific community will agree that if those questionnaires show a lower score, that means that the depression or the PTSD has improved. So that's a really sort of basic answer to a very complex question. I think that when talking about psychedelics, we are always going to find some sort of bias. Psychedelics are tools that they transcend our way of understanding. We try to put them into categories, so we can try to label psychedelics as psychiatric medication, or tools for spiritual growth, or substances for recreation. So we try to create categories in which we try to fit psychedelics into, but they transcend those categories. So that's why it's so difficult to give a just one-dimensioned answer to this. We could talk about efficiency or how effective a therapy is according to certain measurements. But I've spoken with a lot of psychedelic therapists that, for example, they're doing research with anorexia nerviosa and psilocybin, and they say most users, they report that they feel that they have improved, but the markers that we used in the study don't show that improvement in terms of body gain or weight gain, you know. So it's very difficult to define what works and what doesn't work, you know. The good thing about being a psychotherapist is that you can refer to the client or the participant or the user sensation. So from a psychotherapeutic perspective, if the person feels and they say, I have improved because of what we've done, that's what you believe, you know? So we can only base our assumptions on what people tell us. But this, if you go to science, needs to be modified, and you need some questionnaires, and so it's a complex field, and it will be, and it's good that it is, no, that we are not able to simplify things just to numbers and measures.
Great, and maybe two really short ones. Question whether the book talks about the set and setting, the importance of it, and also about the difference between kind of psychotic episodes and spiritual emergence.
Okay, so our set and setting, I have to check. I don't think that I speak much about set and setting. I mean, it's not a topic that I talk about like explicitly, but it's present all the time. I mean, set and setting have a huge impact on the outcomes of psychedelic experiences. So throughout the book, I talk about different settings and different outcomes that happened because of the setting. Yeah. This book is about integration. So it's about what happens after the experience. Yeah. So it's not a book that is intended to show or to teach psychotherapists how to conduct psychedelic experiences. It's a book that focuses on what happens once the experience is finished and afterwards. Yeah. I wish that I will write a book about what happens before, but this is not happened yet. No. So set and setting is part of the discussion, but it's not so much talked because it belongs more to the session itself. Although I do talk about the psychotherapy setting and how to set a framework for integration, in which I like to differentiate what integration is and what psychotherapy is. I think that they are two different practices. So I do create, or I do describe what the integration setting is and what the psychotherapy setting is, which is different in my opinion. Yeah. As for the second question on spiritual emergencies and psychotic breaks, I go into that. Yeah, I think that the term spiritual emergency is a very important and rich term, but also it's a term that's difficult to understand and to use many times. So you will see that when you read the book, it's not written in a diagnostic way. So my intention is not to label things and say this is this and this is that. The idea is more to understand what's happening, to understand more the dynamics of what's happening there, and hoping that this understanding better the dynamics of what happens will help us find ways to support those people. So in a way, it's a very practical book. It aims to understand things with the intention of supporting people. So understanding what is happening, not because we want to label it, but because we want to find a way that we can support people that are going through that. So I do talk about spiritual emergencies and psychotic breaks.
Great. I mean, we can come back to some of more of these clinical aspects, but I think maybe we can go a bit more into the direction of, here we are, 2022. More and more, companies are coming in the space. The psychedelic renaissance is like really happening, and plant medicines are also globalizing. There's more and more interest. And so kind of what are some of the things that are potentially, leading us into a problematic direction, or what is really needed for this space? No, and maybe just to kick it off, and also Jasmine, if you want to contribute to these topics, feel free. In kind of in indigenous healing systems, kind of healing work often brings up challenges. They even in some systems call them pruebas, and they're part of the healing process. So it's kind of after the work, things might get worse, or like symptoms might go up, things might be uncomfortable, fears might go up, and it's all part of a process of releasing and then kind of gaining more strength and more trust in life. Huh? Very much kind of the messages around psychedelics and plant medicine more and more have gone from, like the propaganda against it to now also very much like this is, you take psilocybin and then, you'll feel great afterwards. And, just we've seen also with some cases, in the support service that people afterwards, then when this happens, when people feel maybe more symptoms coming up, more anxiety and things like that, they think there's something wrong with them, you know, because it's like, if you take ibuprofen, your headache goes away straight, and this is not what's happening with what's happening to me. Yeah, curious to hear what you think about what really the focus should be, and what are some of the pitfalls on the ways that psychedelic therapy, you know, plant medicines are being presented in this current moment.
I think that there's several things to consider here. No, on the one hand, I think it's fantastic that so many things are happening. No, and that psychedelics are being again part of our society in a global way. No, that they are being researched in science and in psychiatric treatments, but also that general population are finding interest in that, and they are looking for ways to access these experiences, be either in shamanic or neo-shamanic or self-organized settings, or even that people are learning and increasing the safety standards of recreational use of substances. No? I mean, I can understand that the events such as Burning Man or Boom Festival, they do have something to say about the use of psychedelics. No? They bring certain aspects of psychedelics that are not limited to psychiatric treatment. No? So on the one hand, I think that great things are happening. And on the other hand, I think that one of the pitfalls is what you were saying, no? That this focus on specific experiences. Traditionally, psychedelics, and when I say traditionally, I also mean in the Western tradition. I mean, in the early 50s and 60s, psychedelics were usually understood to be tools that can support us in a process. Yeah, so we use psychedelic as a catalyzer of change, but that is not the end of the story. As you were saying, no, after psychedelic experience, emotions can come up, and we enter a process. No? So we understood psychedelics as part of a process. And now it seems that it's shifting into understanding psychedelics as events, as psychedelic experiences. It's like, okay, you take psilocybin, you heal your depression. You take MDMA, the PTSD disappears. No? So the focus is somehow shifting from the idea of process into the idea of events. And I think that this is a major mistake, no? Because then it puts us people in a very passive situation. It's almost like you take a psychedelic and you're hoping, you're waiting for that substance to do some trick, to do some magic, and you're not even an agent in that or an actor in that story. No? Which I think that the healing potential of psychedelics is that what they show in the end is that we are the responsibles of our own healing, that we can heal ourselves. No, they are tools that empower our understanding of the human being, and they empower us. So if we take that out from psychedelics, I think that we're making a terrible thing. No, and psychedelics should be part tools in a process, not the means or the end by themselves. No, so I think that I hope that psychology, psychiatry will find a way to include psychedelics as part of ongoing process. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges. Another of the challenges is the excessive medicalization that could happen, no? Because so I worry if psychedelics are only going to be labeled as psychiatric medication, no? And then who's going to be able to use them? Who's going to be able to prescribe them? How the access is going to look like? I think that that's a debate that is coming, and we will have to have in the upcoming years, no? And find what contexts are going to be appropriate for the use of psychedelics. Is only going to be in hospitals, or adults, responsible adults, can take decisions and find their own context in which have meaningful experiences. You know, I think that my opinion is that we should go in this later direction. So.
Yeah, and just to add to what Marc shared, you know, I really second the kind of, you know, excitement about the developments that we're making around reintegrating psychedelics and tools, moreover, into the global north, where, let's say, like, you know, if there was a tradition, it was broken. But, you know, similarly, I think like the media and the narrative that the media portrays around psychedelics tends to lose the thread, at least when it's talking about psychedelics in the medical context, because I think like many people might read an article and think, you know, psilocybin will help me cure my depression, and maybe miss the fact that it's embedded in, you know, like Marc was saying, a process. a process of a therapy and working on oneself. And so just taking the medicine out of that context when we're thinking about therapy, you know, and someone going to take that medicine by themselves could have a very, very different effect. And I think, you know, I'm not favoring, you know, the therapeutic context over ceremonial context. I think that there's two separate streams happening at once. And I think actually in the foreword of this book, Jose Carlos Buso speaks about that, you know, that there's like a therapeutic resurgence of these medicines, but also, you know, there's also a growing interest in traditional indigenous ceremonial ritual techniques and technologies. And so both of those things can be true at once. But I think something vital is missing for the, well, not missing, but, you know, I think because these substances have been stigmatized for so long in the global north, that people don't have proper support systems also to deal with the challenges that come up around these substances. And so I think that that's part of the issue, because working for Fireside Project, you know, so many people call up and they're having really terrible experiences, but they don't feel able to share them with the people close to them in their lives for fear of being stigmatized, you know, and I think they can be very isolating experiences for that reason, even though very paradoxically rather, they elicit experiences of deep connection. And I think that also goes to say for many people, you know, experiencing psychedelics and plant medicines in a ceremonial context, you know, the context of the ceremony might be so connective, and there might be a sense of deep community, but then kind of taking oneself out of that context and reintegrating into normal life can also be very destabilizing. And a separate point that I'd like to make is that I think that healing in general and psychedelic healing is a non-linear process. And I think people, like Ben was saying, that, you know, gravitate towards these substances and think that they're taking a magic bullet, a silver bullet that will get them from A to B. But there's a lot of ups and downs that come with the process. And I think that, you know, having the expectation that one might be healed or cured by a particular experience, a particular substance, kind of takes one's own agency out of it. But also, I think, you know, just with the people that I've spoken to, it can also introduce a sense of blame or shame. Many people think that there's something wrong with them because this tool, this experience, this substance didn't work for them in the way that they had expected. And, you know, I think those are some of the things that I've definitely seen go awry with the people that I've spoken to.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And yeah, I echo that, and I appreciate that input. I think that the social component of integration is extremely important and has not been considered enough. So in the book, I talk about the dimensions of integration, which is the ways in which I understood integration throughout the years. At some point, the social dimension became vital, because that's what you say. You have this sense of community when you're doing the ceremony, but then Monday morning you go to your office, you know, and then you're in a completely different world, and that definitely has an impact. So I think that creating this collective culture around integration is part of bringing psychedelics into our worldview, no? And actually thinking about bigger layers of integration, not just the intrapsychic integration of the experience, but integrating these experiences in a larger container that would be our society. So
maybe we can take a moment to look at a question here. Marc, would you say that some therapeutic approaches are better suited for psychedelic integration than others? As far as I've understood, your training was humanistic, experiential, and constructivist. I think it's a great match. So what's your take on it?
I really like that question, because that's something that I've asked myself very much throughout these years. No, I So I don't think that there are therapeutic schools that are better than others. I think that at some stages or for some problems or for some situations, some schools might have a more specific answer to those challenges. Yeah. Then I would say that when I was working mostly with this constructivist and humanistic approach and the meaning making of the experiences, that was very much suited to work with people that had not had so difficult experiences. Yeah, or if it was a difficult experience, but they were not experiencing a lot of symptoms. Yeah. So for me, the game changer was when I started working with people that had really severe symptoms, to the point that they were considering going to the emergency room or going to take psychiatric medication. So when the symptoms are something that is really making the life impossible to continue as it was before. No? People cannot go to work, people cannot sleep, people experience panic attacks on a daily basis. No? So for those situations, I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to address those situations. I don't know if there's better approaches to deal with that, but for these situations, I had to found a psychotherapy that would have tools to deal with the symptoms. Yeah, and that for me was very interesting, no? Because somehow when I discovered grief strategic therapy, it looked like something really cognitive behavioral in approach, but I found that it was very suited to work with psychedelics because it always has the meaning making or the well-being of the client in mind when prescribing certain behavioral or cognitive exercises. Yeah, so for me, it's been a really exciting journey, to go down the cognitive and behavioral path and see how that also has a role in integration and in psychedelic work. When I talk about the dimensions of integration, I talk about the behavioral dimension of integration, which in a way it's what a lot of spiritual teachers say. How do you measure? In Mahayana Buddhism, they say, how do you measure the spiritual development of a student? It's not with the state of mind that they have achieved, it's about the degree of compassion that they can show toward other human beings. So in the end, what we do, the behavior, what manifests in the physical world is also a sign of integration of these higher experiences.
Great. We have 10 more minutes. I suggest we maybe connecting back to the beginning, as I was saying, in our beginning years, we very much were responding to needs of the communities, and we still do that. But then with everything we learned, we then have been thinking about how can we develop more proactive strategies. The book is one of them. Creating a comprehensive book on integration that can help kind of inform therapists or steer this field and be a contribution to the integration field. The other piece that we started to think about under the lead of also with David and Jeronimo, our colleagues at ICERS, was that during all of these years we did this free donation-based support service, and now coming to how can we kind of increase the impact of that type of work. And so one of the things that's been coming out of that is later this year, beginning next year, we're going to start with kind of an apprenticeship process, with I think 10 or 12 apprentices that you're going to supervise as well, and really looking at the opportunity that the online support service brings for people with prior experience, obviously, in psychotherapy, that they can have practicing and being supervised, and in which we create kind of with the vision of really passing on this model and this experience to people in the field who then can bring and pollinate this type of service intervention models in their local environments. And I think Fireside is a brilliant example of being a place and an initiative that was born and grew to really respond to that need. And I think as companies are laying out more psychedelics and the media is more and more positive about the experiences, there's going to be also more and more people who fall through and end up in suffering. And as we have seen, this can be a lot of suffering during long periods of time. So I think it's also the responsibility of kind of more of a network of nonprofits to come together and see how can we really build that net and lay that net out and pollinate in different local contexts, but at the same time keeping them kind of globally connected, so that we all can continuously elevate our practice together and elevate the field and the impact of the integration work. So maybe curious on your views and this upcoming.
Well, I'm always very enlightened by how you see this and the wider perspectives that you can bring to the field. No, I feel that I'm more of a specialist in one field, so I work somehow in depth in something. But I'm really, one of the things that I really like working with you is that you keep this perspective that can include the clinical work, the indigenous rights, and legal defense, or like having a wide perspective on that. Yeah. The intention of the book and the work that I do in integration is not to tell people how they have to work. It's not my intention to create a manual that says integration should be practiced like this, integration should be understood like this. No, the spirit is more, as a teacher of mindset, a teacher of mine used to say, I don't want to teach you psychotherapy, I want to teach you to think about psychotherapy. Yeah, and then you do whatever you feel that you have to do with what you've learned. So my model of integration is a little bit like that. I present a model on how to do things, but I don't say that that's the only way to do it, or even the best. No, but I think that it's important to reflect on what we do. Sometimes we take many things for granted because they've been always done like this, or because someone else said that. No, and I think that a way of creating these higher standards in safety and quality has to do very much with personal accountability. Yeah, what are you doing when you're working with someone else? No, as a medicine facilitator, or a psychotherapist, or as a teacher, or whatever. No, what are you doing in the end? How are you behaving with other people? And this book pretends, or has the intention to help people to think about integration practices. Yeah, and maybe give a couple of twists to what they were already doing, but see it in a different light, and maybe deepen the knowledge. No? And that's, I guess, that how I see that we can increase the quality of what we do, no? And look for a future in which these practices are going to be included in society, but not only by specialists or doctors or psychiatrists, but that we create this collective network of support in which we all behave the best we can. No? We all do the best we can, either if we are someone that sets up a retreat center, or someone that serves the medicine, or a psychedelic therapist in a clinical trial that has not been the shamanic path at all. So that people can reflect, but people can increase the quality of the work that we do. That's the intention, and that's what I hope to see.
And I think in terms of the service of integration, as psychedelics and plant medicine become more part of society, we are kind of actually vouching for them becoming essential services, government funded. We achieved this for 2 years, funding from the European Commission. I don't know, I think Fireside is fully privately funded, not through philanthropic support, if I'm not wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is kind of where we are at now, but I actually think also in our advocacy efforts that this should become presented as this is actually an essential service. This is really needed if we want to roll out psychedelic therapies and other uses of plant medicine in a safe way, and for us all to kind of collaborate on making that happen. I think that's part of what we see for the future as well. And maybe to end, we have a few more minutes. Jasmine, I don't know if you have some last words you want to share as well.
Well, yeah, I see a question from Andrea, which is, what was the favorite part of this book, which is a kind of hard one, but I just want to speak to the fact that this book is such a synthesis. It brings together so many different and diverse perspectives when it comes to the history, origins, and evolution of what we call psychedelic integration. Narrowing down really broadens like what integration can be. And so for me, I really found it an expansive read, and very lucidly written as well, or at least very lucidly translated. It kind of takes you through in a very linear way. And I really appreciate how many of the kind of theoretical and philosophical insights are kind of woven into the stories from Marc's clients, and there's some really beautiful artwork featured also, and it really kind of grounds the wisdom of the theory that Marc talks about and shares in kind of his personal understandings and insights and those of his clients. So I don't know, I think it's hard for me to pick a favorite part of this book because I really love it, and I know working for Synergetic Press, I might be biased, but at the same time, like as someone who's just broadly in this space, I think it's it really speaks to where the conversation around integration should be heading, and adding to that, I think that just our previous comment or discussion on the globalization of these substances and medicines, I really feel that we need to kind of talk about the risks in a way that's integrated into the larger conversation, the benefits and the risks, in order to really move forward in this space. And so, I think that's what I'd like to share.
Thank you.
Thank
Marc,
you.
do you have some last words before we close?
I just want to thank everybody that took the time to be with us this afternoon. And I hope that we can continue finding forums to keep sharing knowledge and having meaningful discussions.
Yeah, and also want to add, big thank you to all of the supporters, the philanthropists, foundations who've been supporting us throughout all of these years. For so many years now, that about 10 years that we have been able to do this free donation based, so making sure that everyone who needs it can have access, and that's really thanks to the generosity and people who have believed in our work, and also those who have supported the work in writing the book. Big thank you to all of our supporters, and also to Synergetic Press, for their partnership and for publishing this book, which is really the culmination out of many years of work and research, and so I hope it's going to be a big contribution to the field. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks everyone.